And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Bret Lada. He is an actor and director whose debut feature film, The Andy Baker Tape, is now available on VOD. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so pumped to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
We're so excited to talk with you because if there's two things I love, it's food stuff and horror stuff. And the Andy Baker Tape combines both. And so I'm really excited to talk with that. But before we do, let's take it back to the very beginning. How did you get introduced to horror?
You know, that's a complicated story. I think the first film that really scared me as a kid, I was trying to find it the other day. And I just remember it was about a little kid that's trapped in a well. And there's a girl singing Farajaka to him. I think I watched it at my grandma's house when I was 3. And I looked it up, and it's this Disney movie. I think it's called Doll of Glass or Child of Glass. And I watched the trailer to it the other day, and I was like, this isn't even scary. But as a little kid, it terrified me. And there's an image in the film where this girl shows up, and she's like fluorescent blue. And I remember having this vivid dream of this fluorescent blue figure in my room as a kid. And I still can't remember. I still don't know if it was a dream or if it was something real. But ever since then, I kind of became like hooked, and I watched everything that I could get my hands on.
Wow. I'm looking at the cover for this right now, and it's boy, is it like 70s.
Dude, it was, and for me, I couldn't remember the name of it for years. I always got it confused with, what was that Sean Connery movie? It was Darby O'Connell and the Little People. I think that was it.
Oh my gosh, yes. I completely forgot about that movie.
And at the end of that movie, there's a banshee that comes out. And I remember the banshee was also terrifying too when I was a kid. And I thought that those two were the same movie for years until the other day I was like, what is the name of this movie? And I sat down and I figured out that they were two separate films.
Wild. So Child of Glass was like your first memory of seeing like something that was terrifying to you.
Terrified me,
Did you watch a lot of horror as a kid, or did you stay away from it?
Yeah, I did. You know, like one of the first movies that my mother showed me was Alien. And I remember that she turned off the chest buster scene when that came on. I think I was like 3 or 4 years old. And
holy cow.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to see the chest buster until I don't know, maybe when I hit puberty. But I remember watching that, and horror. I was more of like a psychological thriller person, but I think that and horror go hand in hand. So the films that I was initially drawn to were the ones that kind of crept under your skin in a different way. And then I felt that like the classic horror films, like all the Freddy's and, Friday the 13th, that was never really my wheelhouse until I got a little bit older and I started to appreciate them for what they were. But I liked really dark psychological thrillers. That was kind of what I gravitated towards.
As a kid, you liked dark psychological thrillers?
Always. And I'll tell you where that came from. Because my grandmother was a Chesterfield cigarette model. So in like the 1940s and 50s, they were like the classic, she like used to model with Ava Gardner and doing all the hand modeling. And I think she wanted to be an actress and never really made the leap. She grew up in South Dakota and she met my grandfather during World War II. But as a kid, when she would watch me, all she had on TV was just the old Turner Classic Films. So I was watching films that were like way outside of my wheelhouse when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. And that's what I really grew up on, was watching all these classic films. So I got kind of a dark taste for heavy dramas at an early age.
Wow.
I mean, of course, I loved Rescuers Down Under and like Five Goes West. Like I watched those too.
No, fuck that. No, dark thrillers from the 20s only. Very highbrow taste for a child.
Yeah.
What an introduction to genre films.
Yeah.
I mean, that's normally like you start off with maybe creature features or something that is like somewhat kid friendly, but no, you just went deep into that psychological thriller.
Well, even like the first good creature feature I saw was Rodan, and I remember I watched that with my parents.
Wow,
I was
highbrow. I mean, I guess Rodan isn't technically highbrow, but like not a lot of kids are watching Japanese creature features when
that Rodan. I didn't even find that to be a horror. At the end of Rodan, I broke down sobbing. I like cried. I was a little kid. I was in a hotel in North Carolina. My parents were trying to sleep, and I would not let them turn that movie off. And I just remember pouring out tears as soon as they kill Rodan at the end of that movie. It was just so sad for me.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Well, so were you easily scared as a kid? Like, was it easy to freak you out?
Yes and no. You know, like, I was always a sucker for jump scares, and that still gets me to this day. It's like, and that's when I bring up my film, it's some of those moments that really gets me. But like, I have a really active imagination, so when I know something is going to happen, my brain projects like, when's it going to happen, what's going to happen, and then I kind of work myself up, and that's when I scare myself. Like, even movies that aren't even scary, I can get scared by, because my brain kind of spirals of like, this is going to go here, this is going to go here, where's this going to go, when's it going to happen? And that's when I kind of ignite, and then I get myself more worked up, then the film actually works me out.
Okay. And that was the same as a kid. Is that you as an adult as well?
I think it's the both. I think, it's like we're just an evolved version of our 4-year-old selves.
Yeah. Do you remember some of your like favorites in horror or your psychological thrillers as a kid?
Oh yeah, as a kid, it was not even necessarily like specific films. I think for me it was moments from films, and it was like, I even remember in like The Rescuers Down Under, George C. Scott voices the poacher in that, and it was such like a larger than life character, and it was just the moments of him like throwing them down, and they're trapped inside this kind of cave, and I used to go around as like a little kid on top of my stairs being like, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I used to do that to everyone. So it was just moments like that got me excited. Of course, like films like Alien. When I saw Alien 2, I guess they're kind of like sci-fi horror. I remember the first time I saw Halloween 3, and I was in the Florida Keys, and I might have been like 7 or 8 at the time. And then I wasn't really like understanding the movie, but as soon as their faces decomposed into this pile of like spiders and centipedes and snakes, that really freaked me out. I loved giant spider films as a kid too, like Arachnophobia, Eight-Legged Freaks, anything that, I guess I kind of gravitated more towards like creature stuff.
Terry absolutely fucking hates arachnophobia and spiders. Oh, really? So that's very
Well, Terry, I got something for you to look up if you haven't. You got to look up coconut crabs. You haven't seen those? Do you know what they are?
Coconut crabs are... Oh, you got to look them up right now on the podcast.
Coconut crabs are like 2.5-foot crabs, and they think that they devoured Amelia Earhart's corpse. When she crash landed on Christmas Island, they think that coconut crabs pulled her body out of the plane and devoured her corpse.
Yes!
Okay, so like I don't have a problem looking at crabs, but these look too much like spiders for my...
Exactly, that's why I want you to see them.
No, I have this problem. Listeners will know this. I can't even look at a picture of a real spider. Like real spiders, it doesn't matter if it's in my room or on a screen. I just can't look at it. Yeah, I have no problem with CG spiders, like Eight-Legged Freaks. Once they get to the giant spider and they're computer generated, doesn't bother me. Anything real, and those look too much like spiders. I can't. I'm noping out of that.
They're horrifying. Well, like I said, I think I got into like spider stuff as a kid. I used to spend a lot of time in the Florida Keys, and I remember going through. The Mississauga Indians lived in this park called Flamingo. And my parents took me on this nature walk through Flamingo. And I remember like stopping and my mom coming over to me really gently and being like, stop for a second. And she brushed something off my chest. And I guess I walked through a golden orb weaver web. And golden orb weavers are, I'd say they're like 6 inches in diameter. And that was on me. I used to be terrified of spiders. Then I had this vivid dream that I was in a bathtub. I think I might have been like 8 at the time. I'm in a bathtub and this giant tarantula is just crawling all over me. And in the bathtub, I have this baseball.
Crawl out of his own skin.
Dude, this is where it gets really weird. I had this baseball bat in my hand, and I kept trying to stab at the tarantula with the baseball bat, and I couldn't. And then somewhere in the dream, I finally hit its abdomen, and it exploded. And I woke up from that dream sobbing because I realized that the spider was just trying to play with me. And since then, I can't kill any kind of insects. I can't kill spiders. Like, I'll kill flies since they annoy the fuck out of me, but I cannot kill a spider.
I can't relate, Brett. I can't relate.
Play with you. Oh my god.
Lay its eggs inside of you.
Yeah,
that's its idea of playing.
Maybe. Well, I hope not.
Oh man. Huh. Okay, we got to get away from the spider conversation because I have recurring nightmares involving spiders. So
I just took you guys on a really weird tangent through my life. You guys steer back to somewhere normal, okay?
Normal. Well, my question for you then is: so we talked a little bit. You talked a little bit about how like you kind of like the jump scares, but do any like horror movies now actually really scare you and like keep you up at night or kind of freak you out in that way?
Yes. What was that? I just watched Sinister, and Sinister kind of freaked me out because I like worked myself up too with that. You know, I was in college when I saw this, and the first time I saw Paranormal Activity, the first one, I got home from the movie theater. I saw it with my friend Cody Mildy. I was living in a single dorm by myself. My TV started sparking. And that kept, like, I turned on the lights. I could not fall asleep. All I thought about was the wife in that movie just wandering around the campus of my college, thinking that she was there. So it's films like that kind of creep me up. Like, I haven't seen anything lately, you know, that... I mean, I just... When I was researching for the Andy Baker tape, I watched Megan is Missing. And that really... The ending of that is just such a graphic visual. And the idea of what happened to that girl... You know, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but that kept me awake because I was just thinking, like, if you're this girl and you're trapped like that, that has to be the worst thing in the world.
Terry, have you seen Megan is Missing?
Well, that comes with a tight disclaimer, so it's a big trigger warning for anyone to watch it.
I just bought it on Blu-ray because I'm insane, but but it is one of the few movies that I had to stop watching because it upset me so much. Yeah. And then I went back and watched it again later, but there's a moment in the middle of the movie that like they show a photo, and I watched it in high school, and I would not revisit it for years because that image was seared into my head. I slammed my computer shut. It upset me so much, and I don't do that very often.
Is that the one with like... They're not trash cans, but like... Yes,
I think so. Yes.
I think I've seen like that image
of her nose. Of her nose.
Maybe.
Why am I doing... No,
that's a different part, but I know what you're...
No, but that image... That's the part. That's the part that scared me with her nose, but the barrels is the... There's a bunch of stuff to do with barrels, like, at the end and with the lake.
Okay, that's what I thought. I think I've seen an image of that.
You have, since that goes online. It's the viral image of when he... I mean, I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it, but when he pops open the barrel and you see what's inside the barrel real quick, it's just like that quick blip on the screen, and it just, like, gets inside you, and that scared the hell out of me.
Bad.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah. Bad. I've just seen that image online, and it's like, what the fuck? We kind of talked about it. So was the last film that really scared you Megan is Missing?
No. You know what? I think before that, I saw... This is true. You just reminded me. I went to go see The House That Jack Built at the IFC in New York. And I wouldn't even say that The House That Jack Built is a horror per se, but some of the elements in House That Jack Built, especially the scene when he's with Siobhan... I think... No, not Siobhan Fallon, but when he's hunting the kids... And that disturbed me so much. There's a Chinese bakery that's next to the IFC in New York, and I left the movie theater and I went to go binge eat at that Chinese bakery. I had like 3 cream rolls and like an egg custard because I was so like my body was on such an adrenaline spike from being so worked up from that I had to find a way to kind of take myself down. So it's that's not even necessarily horror. It's like the psychological elements of what's going on, and that's what really kind of freaks me out.
I hate that movie.
House of Jack Built?
I hate that fucking movie so much. But that's another podcast. Anyway.
Yeah. So you mentioned as a kid that you were drawn to the psychological, thrillers and horror and that kind of stuff. Is that still true as an adult?
100%. The films that I like a lot now are definitely heavy genres or heavy dramas. And I'm trying to, like films like Funny Games. That's what scares me. Even that film. Okay. What was that movie that came out? It was Amore. I forget. It was.
Oh, the
about
Haneke
the two,
one. The other Haneke one about dementia. It's the older couple. Yes, and they start taking care of each other during dementia. And I have such, this is so bad, but I went to go see that movie, and it's obviously an emotional trip. And at the time, I think I was like 21 years old when that came out. And I was kind of dating someone, and we went to go see it, and I knew this relationship really wasn't working out. Ooh. And I was trying to find a way to be like, hey, we're better off as friends. I don't think this should work. I was too chicken to do it, so I was like, let's go to a movie, and we went to go see Amore, whatever it is. And halfway through, the girl who I was with, who's happily married now, and she got herself a much better partner than I could have ever been, starts sobbing on my shoulders. And I was like, are you okay? And she explained that, her favorite aunt was going through dementia. And, we're seeing this movie, and I was just like, I cannot, do this. So we ended up dating another month and a half afterwards because I just could not. I was like, how could I do this to someone? So I was trying to find a way to get out of it. But she's a great human being, but we just were not compatible. But that's my Amore story.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That backfired.
100%. 100%, yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Michael Haneke, I feel like, would love that story, too. I don't know why. I just feel like he would find...
I'm sure that's why he made the movie, to give people that kind of mind fuck.
Someone's going to take a first date on this or take a date on this, and it's just going to
ruin.
Fuck it up.
Ruin it.
And then in college, too, it's like I do like Lars von Trier. And the first time I was recommended to watch Antichrist was by a film professor that I had. And he said, I can't tell you to watch this, but I can't also say don't watch this. And that movie, the psychological elements of that, that's what really freaked me out. Thinking about the concepts, then you go back and you're like, wait, she knew the entire time that baby was crawling towards the window. And it's all these little things that you get sprinkled throughout the movie. And I think that's the aspect of horror that or dramas or horrors that really get to me. It's why we make these, and especially the film that I brought into today. It's why do we make these decisions? And when we can see the outcome, and there's going to be a bad outcome coming, yet we still make this decision because of some strange human compulsion.
Well, okay, but before we jump into talking about the movie that you brought today, we want to hear a little bit more about the Andy Baker tape. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about what the Andy Baker tape is?
Yeah, so the Andy Baker tape was a passion project that I created with my partner Dustin Fontaine during the pandemic. And it's a found footage film. It's the last known footage of food blogger Jeff Blake and his half-brother Andy Baker. And we shot this in October of 2020. It's a two-hander for the most part, and we didn't really even have a predicted outcome for this film. Mm-hmm. I came from working in TV a lot. I did a lot of network TV out of New York, and right before the pandemic, I was in a short film that won the Academy Award. So I had all this momentum going, and then the world shut down. And Dustin, he was a blue man, he was working out of Boston. And right when the pandemic hit, I just came off the high of the Academy Award, and then I ended up getting a grant through SAG, which I should have put towards my apartment because I lost my apartment in New York. But I actually bought a camera with it because I never learned the behind the scenes of the technical aspect of filming and shooting things. I worked as a producer in the past, but I never really learned cinematography, and I never spent the time to really dial in on that skill. So the first 3 months of the pandemic, I just spent learning how to use a camera, how to edit better, how to color grade. And I shot a couple short films with my girlfriend in New York, and Dustin and I were co-writing and producing these shorts. The first one was terrible. The second one was decent. And then Dustin and I were like, let's write a feature. Let's take this on a road trip across the country. Who the heck knows what's going to happen with it? And it was originally a documentary, which we were going to shoot kind of mockumentary style, going out to Mount Rushmore and Big Sur. And then we wrote this script and we dialed it into being these two brothers that go on a food tour across New Jersey. Now, I remember when we got a final cut with this and we were happy with everything, we were like, well, we could submit it to some film festivals. Let's see where this takes us. We were like, if it gets into one, we're happy. If it doesn't, at least we had the experience. We ended up playing 26 pretty high caliber film festivals last year. I think we won 28 awards total, and it took me around the country. It truly, during the pandemic, was the best thing that could have happened to me. Not only from having a project that I was so proud of get out there and to get seen, but also just to have something that gave me that allowed me to travel around the country and to meet filmmakers and to see what people are actually putting out and to learn from these experiences and to actually see yourself kind of walking down a different path than you actually anticipated. For the most part, I just focused solely on acting. I was in New York. I was constantly, it was like, I'm going to this audition. I have this job. I'm going to film this. But this gave me a little bit of the confidence to not just live inside of the smaller box of being an actor, but to use all the lessons that I've learned in storytelling and to put into an actual project. And that's what the Andy Baker tape is, long story short.
I'm curious at the food blogger angle. Yeah. Because it sounds like this was a passion project. Are you, and I mean, I've been to your Instagram account. I see all the pictures of food. Are you a big foodie?
Dude, I care more about food than I do sex, to be honest. Food is the most important thing in the world to me. I mean, don't tell my girlfriend that, but it's true. I love eating. And that's the way that I explore, I familiarize myself with new cities and new places, that I try all of the local foods. I try to get my hands on whatever I can.
What's the best meal you've ever had? Real quick. I need to know.
Oh, I mean, that's so hard. I tell you, my favorite meal, there was a little Cuban restaurant in the Florida Keys that I used to go to as a kid called Manny and Isa's. And Manny was a Cuban chef that came over, I think in like the 1960s, 1970s. And he opened up this little shack in Isla Mirada, Florida. And it was the most popular place in town. It was just fresh off the boat fish, black beans and rice. They had this dessert called natilla, which was this just delicious Cuban, really light cinnamon, almost like a rice custard. I get wet dreams from this meal all the time. It's like my favorite thing. And in that part of the Florida Keys, Dan Aykroyd lived there, Steve Martin, Gene Hackman. So they would go in all the time, and I'd be like a little kid, and it'd be like a table and four over there, and it would be Gene Hackman with Steve Martin, eating eating this food. And like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of the models for the Andy Baker tape. My father is a Steve Martin junkie. I grew up like worshiping these guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nothing like having a meal and then Steve Martin and them are just sitting at a table next to you.
The thing is, it's like, there is no, in that part of the Florida Keys, there's just no pretension at all. So you'd see these guys wearing like ripped up jean shorts and a fishing t-shirt from 1972. And that was just like, it was to see these people in their purest form. Right.
Wow.
Away from food though. So I always love to ask that question about everyone's favorite, like best meal they've ever had. Cause it's just, food is the reason I love to travel too, so I always love to hear about it. But so I'm a found footage freak. Everybody knows this. I just got my first found footage tattoo. We love found footage here.
We support you.
Why found footage? I mean, was it simply like down to a budget thing for you with like that?
Yeah,
technique?
I mean that's a great question, and it comes to a multitude of things. Mm-hmm. I actually did the first scripted Lifetime show in New York years ago called "I Love You But I Lied," and it was by the showrunner from Catfish, and it was shot almost like this mockumentary style. I did the pilot of that, and I remember watching the DP work on this, and it was basically found footage, but a little bit more elevated. And I was like, this is such a way. I mean, we did a 30-page script in 3 days. And I was like, this is such a way that you can shoot a project, get it on its feet quick, and move forward. So when Dustin and I wrote this story, number one, we were both unemployed actors. I just lost my apartment. And the lowest budget feature that I ever produced I produced the feature in 2018 for $56,000. And, I wasn't going to come up with $56,000 like that. So we decided that found footage was the best road to take because A, we're self-contained. It was also the top of the pandemic, so I didn't have to have a DP with us. I didn't have to have a cinematographer. I didn't have to have any kind of sound team with us. We could use a shotgun mic. It could be the two of us for the most part during the pandemic. And we could kind of get in and out of these locations. You know, we actually shot all the film, like all the food stops in the film are actual working restaurants during the pandemic. Like those were not actual locations. Like there's a part in the scene, in one of the scenes where someone yells out. They go, "Are you from the Food Network?" And that's actually they say, "Are you from YouTube?" And that's actually people in the parking lot calling out to us, being like, "You guys are really YouTube food bloggers." So we didn't want to, you know, we could basically drop in with a quick camera, shoot, and get out without, you know, having to rent a location, go through all the hurdles of that. And it was the easiest way to stay self-contained. And we did. I mean, we did the whole feature truly at the time for about $2,200. And I'd say like half of that went towards a new hard drive, some camera gear, and some good aperture lights to take with us. But most of it was just we were getting hotels just on the food and the gas we spent driving around New Jersey. And we did it at the time for about, you know, $2,000 or $2,200.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's also with me. You know, I had a brilliant producer that did all the sound editing, Arthur Giamelitis. He deserves 100% a shout out. He did that out of Australia, all the sound engineering. I edited, I color graded it, I did all that, so we didn't have to outsource anything. Yeah, I learned how to color grade to do this film.
Holy
so
shit!
I spent the time.
That's not easy. Color grading is hard as shit.
I had a lot of fun with it. To be honest, the editing process to me is just as fun as the acting process. And color grading, when I was first learning it, it was a monumental task. But now that I've done it, I do it all the time for self-tapes when I have to send stuff out or real quick for my friend's stuff. And, you know, it's like riding a bike. You know, the first few times are tough, then you get used to it, and then you're just off and running.
Wow. So fucking cool. That makes the movie even cooler to me. Like, I love this movie, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
So how long have you, because it sounds as if you and Dustin are real friends.
Yeah, we are. Dustin was one of my best friends in college. You know, I remember Dustin years ago. The first time I met him, I remember he sauntered into a room. He kind of looked like a younger Johnny Depp. He had this white tank top and he was playing a guitar, and that was his shtick in college. He would walk into a party and he would play guitar, but he was the guy that would actually make women swoon for him. He wasn't like one of the cheesy ones. He was always really good at it. He looked a lot different then than he does in the film. He never had a beard before, and his hair used to be down to his shoulders. But I mean,
Dustin, he rocks that beard really well.
He does, but he can't have a beard normally because he's in the Blue Man Group, and he's back in Blue Man Group right now.
Back in the Blue Man Group.
Yeah, he is. He's performing in New York right now.
Wow, that's wild in and of itself.
Yeah. The entire story behind this movie is actually like the more details you share, I'm like, I'm sorry, what is this? Like, that's a movie in and of itself when a blue man and an actor come together to make a movie.
Well, we give some homage to the Blue Man. You know, like there's the one scene in the beginning where he's kind of like drumming on the side of the water tower, and that's all like a tribute to his Blue Man Group roots. And you know, he always was the kind of guy that could just, you know, go out to like lunch and he'd be throwing up chicken nuggets and catching it in his mouth, and he had those skills from an early age. And Blue Man, he's just fantastic.
Wow. I wanted to bring it up because I think one of the things that makes this movie so successful is you both have such an easygoing chemistry together that it, even though, you know, you're supposed to be brothers that haven't seen each other in forever, you fall back into like a rapport so easily in this movie that it makes it so incredibly watchable. So I was curious if there was like an authenticity to that friendship.
There is, but that also came from the fact that we co-wrote this project together, and in co-writing that, there were discussions to actually switch the characters originally, where Dustin could have easily played Jeff in his own way, and I could have played Andy in my way. But as we were writing it and the stories were unfolding, it definitely worked out the way it was. During the script writing process, we improv'd a lot. You know, I would say that 85% of this film is scripted, and we wrote this out. In the film, there's 15% improv. But I've acted with Dustin for years. So we have a comfort and a sensibility. And while we were workshopping and while, we rehearsed a little bit because I didn't, a lot of the scenes, like I said, we would show up to a location, get in and out within an hour. So I didn't want to be there playing with lines and trying to figure out stuff in the moment. So we would kind of block, rehearse, do the rehearsal at home, drive to the location. We were good to go. We were dialed in. We got going. We adapted to our situations, our surroundings, and we got out. One of the big things that I really emphasized as a director of this was I wanted earnesty through the entire project. I didn't want anyone to see a second of there's extra gloss or extra acting, that these people are really experiencing this and going through this. And at the end of the day, because we're not watching all the takes, we really kind of have to trust and take off one another, which is what we did. We certainly came into the scenes undercutting it as opposed to coming in on top and being glossy, but just having that and trusting each other's eyes in the scenes kept us connected in a really simple way. And then I also, and to elaborate a little bit, I don't know if a lot of actors watch this, but the one thing that I realized that helped make acting in this easier was that we are actually doing the do's. And what I mean by that is because we're shooting and we're holding the camera and we're playing this, we're doing all the things that these characters are doing. So you don't even really have to act. At a certain point, you're just kind of like saying the lines and you're with each other. And if you trust in the fact that when I'm driving the car and I have this guy chasing me, I'm going to be like, what the fuck is going on? It's going to come out organically. And that was really important, just to not push it and to have the organic simplicity of these two people coming together.
That's cool.
Damn. Everyone needs to see the Andy Baker tape, but but okay, Bret, we've talked about your horror history and your film, but what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
I brought with me 28 Weeks Later, and as kind of a prelude to that, I'm also going to sprinkle in 101 Dalmatians, and I'm going to explain how these two connect.
So excited to understand how these two are connected.
You teased that a little bit offline, and I'm like, I gotta know. So
in my horror cinema universe, these two are connected films.
Wow. Okay, so before we launch into that incredible story, I'll read a quick synopsis of the film for everybody. 6 months after the rage virus was inflicted on the population of Great Britain, the U.S. Army helps to secure a small area of London for the survivors to repopulate and start again. But not everything goes to plan.
They would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for the meddling kids, but we'll get to that.
That's right.
Let's take it back. I want to know, how did you see this movie? When did you see it? How old were you? Why is this your Scarred for Life movie?
Yeah.
Give us your horror story.
So, I feel like I've been rambling on when I do this podcast, so if I go for too long, cut me off and shut me up. But I first saw this film. It came out in 2007. I saw it in high school with my friend Jeff Cafone, and I loved the first one. The first one was horrifying to me. Specifically, that moment in the trailer in the first one when you see the zombie infected with rage at the window and he breaks through. That moment terrified me, and that freaked me out. When I saw this film, you're going into it and you think you're going to see a zombie movie, okay? The movie became so sickly twisted for me when the government starts actually shooting the pedestrians too. And you have like the civilians and you have the government. So you have, and you have powerhouse actors in this film. It was Idris Elba's like one of his first big roles. And that's before Idris Elba was Idris Elba. And he's playing this general that's forced to make this decision I have to do the right thing. We have to kill everyone. And I remember watching that, and when they're sniping out all the innocent bystanders running through, I got such a pit in my stomach of being like, you can't trust when shit hits the fan, you can't trust anyone. I mean, that was one of the things that really got me about the movie. It's also, the movie handles such deep themes, The opening scene is Robert Carlyle and his wife, and they're in this they're in this shelter. And he's talking to her about he's going to keep her safe. He's going to protect her. All of a sudden, the horde rushes in. They have to run out. Robert Carlyle's separated from his wife. he jumps out the window and he leaves her with the horde. And there's this great scene where Robert Carlyle looks up, she looks down at him, you see the betrayal in her face and you see the remorse in his face, and he runs. And it's the question that asks. It's like, what would you do in this moment? You know, like, what would we do if we're in a room together and a fucking horde of zombies breaks in, your loved one's on the other side of the room, you can't do anything to save her. Do you die too? Do you run away? Like, what's the virtuous thing? And there's no right answer. I mean, that's what the film has. It's like no matter when you're faced with these circumstances, there's no way out for any of these characters, because even if you escaped, you know, that character, Robert Carlyle, for the short time he's left alive in the film, is mentally tormented the entire time, and he deals with that. And then even, you know, I feel like every character in that film deals with some kind of repercussion for their actions. That's a young Jeremy Renner, too. This is before Jeremy Renner was Marvelized, you know? It's like...
I know.
It's like, I think that came out right before The Hurt Locker. So it's before he did The Hurt Locker.
I was joking about how Jeremy Renner plays the same fucking character in every movie, just like a weird military man.
But there's something about, you know, younger Jeremy Renner in this that you just root for him. And he's so likable. But he's one of the soldiers at the beginning that he actually shoots. He shoots 2 people. I just rewatched it again, and he shoots 2 people. So you're rooting for him the entire time. He's saving the kids. He knows that, you know, at the end they kind of get there's a flood of gas coming in because the government's just trying to gas out London, just kill everything. They're in a car that won't start. There's kids in the car. It's Rose Byrne, who's another powerhouse actress. Jeremy Renner makes the choice to get out of the car, get it behind and push it. Meanwhile, the government's coming in from behind with flamethrowers, and he knows that if he doesn't get the car out, these kids are going to die. As soon as he pushes the car away, he gets torched with flamethrowers, and you just watch him fall and burn, and it's like, that image scarred me too, because it's so powerful and vivid, and it's right when you start to love this guy, and you start to be like, yes, he's the good, there is a good guy in this movie.
There is a good guy. He's
taken from and it was that, and then you get to, you know, that's like the all is lost moment in the film, and then they get to this subway station, and it's Rose Byrne. She's vulnerable, and I don't know if this was like an implied theme, but, you know, she's a woman, okay, and they're being chased now by Robert Carlyle, who's the father to the 2 little kids in this film, and they start walking down that tube station in London, and it's pitch black, and all you can kind of see is they hold up like the sniper gun. There's a little bit of night vision, and I remember watching this, and it was at the point in the movie theater when I was 18. I couldn't even watch the screen because I was getting myself worked up. I knew something was going to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen. And then when Rose Byrne, who's the only other kind of salvation character in this film, she gets jumped by Robert Carlyle. And it's so violent the way that he kills her. And it's, you know, it's horrific, number one, because she's getting killed, but it's also this like brutal man on woman violence thing. And also that was so disturbing to see, and any kind of violence is, but this particular, because Rose Byrne in this movie is so fragile, and you see that she's doing the right thing. And it was just those elements combined. I remember leaving this movie theater, and also one more thing to touch on too is the soundtrack to that film. And that's something that I feel like is underrated. Okay. And they bring in this it's like this like rock score, and it's done in like this grungy rock way. And it was the first time I remember seeing a horror film that kind of breaks away from like the standard trope music. And it was this kind of like power rock, dirty score of like, the world's burning and no one's going to fucking save us. And it was just the combination of those elements, and leaving that film, I remember I was like speechless.
Yeah. So this movie, it sounds like the entire movie just like fucked you up.
Well, it's true, because they don't give you a respite, you know, and like once the train leaves the station, quote unquote, you know, there's one little scene when they escape and they get to kind of like a field, and for like 30 seconds, there's an ice cream truck, everyone's breathing, and they look down the field, and there's a mob of zombies headed their way.
Yes, there sure
Yep.
And then Harold Perrineau is flying in the helicopter, and it's just there's no break. And
None.
in some films, it's and that's another testament to this film is the editing, because some films, and I think horror, they do a little bit too much of like a real quick jump cut like this. But this film has so many quick butterfly jump cuts, and you're not really expecting and what that does is that it throws off your equilibrium. So you don't know. It's like, wait, it's like, and it's like you're bouncing around, and psychologically as a viewer, you don't really have like a singular thing to grab onto because you're getting hit from all sides.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You have brought up like all the scenes I want to like dig in deep and talk about. But before we do that, I gotta know. So I want to hear your Dalmatian story.
Yeah.
Before we dig into these scenes.
I've always been really freaked out by eyes. Okay. And there's a scene at the end of 101 Dalmatians when Cruella de Vil is chasing all the they're in the back of the van. Cruella de Vil is fleeing down the road, and she's got these pulsing, bulging, buggy eyes. And it was so, as a kid at the doctor's office, I remember that my doctor, Dr. Michael Sabat, used to play Disney films all the time. And 101 Dalmatians would be on, and I'd see Cruella de Vil's eyes all the time, and it would scare the shit out of me, the living shit out of me. So, to go back, I think it's what the connection is it's the same eyes in 28 weeks later. It's the same eyes in 28 days later, that when they're infected, it's this, they're just distorted and scary. Yep. And like I said, it was the trailer of the first 28 weeks later that every time it was on TV, they used to show the scene of the infected looking in the window, and he had these orange eyes, and it was just shot so well. That scared the shit out of me. So it's just those two being connected, and Cruella de Vil's eyes as a kid terrified me, and then the connection to the eyes in 28, the 28 whatever universe is equally as horrifying.
Maybe Cruella, was the first infected.
I have no doubts, okay? Yeah. She's heinous, that woman, all right?
Okay, so before we do dig into it, I think Mary Beth, you and I have a very similar kind of story of not remembering this movie at all. I saw this movie when it first came out in movie theaters. That was the one and only time I've seen this movie, I think, until last night when I rewatched this. And I'll be honest, I don't remember anything about this movie. It was almost as if I had like a black hole where this movie was. I remember being excited to see it because I love 28 Days Later. I remember kind of a little bit of disappointment after the movie was over when I first saw it. And that was about it. And so I'm watching this last night, and as I'm seeing scenes, it's almost like that feeling of like watching a trailer and then you go see the movie, and it's like you have a little bit of snippets of like, oh yeah, that was in the trailer, that was in the trailer, that was in the trailer. That's how it felt watching this movie. And let me tell you, this was a fucking treat, because I was swooped up in this story so much in this movie that I completely forgot. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that Jeremy Renner was in this. I didn't know Rose Byrne was in this. I didn't know that Harold from Lost was in this. I didn't know that, all these characters. I'm like, Imogen Poots, right?
I think it's like one of our first movies.
Yeah.
Didn't remember any of it. Didn't remember the storyline. I was like, oh my God, he left his wife. And then, oh my God, his wife is alive. Like, I don't know how I had such a black hole where this movie was, but it was such a treat rewatching it last night and experienced it almost for the first time. And I know, Mary Beth, you were saying something a little offline that was kind of similar to that.
Yeah, because I watched this. I remember the exact circumstances of why I watched this, but I don't remember anything about it because I watched it in my college dorm my freshman year of college. It was like reading. It was like a long weekend and everyone went home, but I didn't want to go home. So I was watching movies in my giant empty dorm. Well, it wasn't giant, but my big empty dorm room, my building. And so I was watching it, incredibly depressed, and forgot everything about this movie. Like, all I remember is being kind of freaked out that I was by myself, like, in my dorm watching this. But then remembered literally nothing about this movie after the first time, like after the kids sneak out. I didn't even remember the cold open. I just remembered the kids getting there on the plane escaping, and then nothing else. I don't know what, I think I was just like, had that freshman depression. I was going through some shit, forgot literally everything. So I was like watching my movie for the first time today.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I feel like that this movie, especially with everything that we've kind of seen the past few, it's like it is almost relevant in some ways, in a different way that it
it's
might have
incredibly
been
relevant.
then. And the first one is Danny Boyle, and the first one is a different level of the film. You know, the first one is really, you know, you have Brendan Gleeson, Cillian Murphy in that one, and it's Naomi Harris too, and it's just so it's so beautiful. And when Brendan Gleeson's character gets infected in the eye, it's heartbreaking in a different way. Where that movie really, I feel like, as much of it's a horror, it's also a really dark drama. And this director took the direction of 28 Weeks Later and made it more frenetic, and took what Danny Boyle established and kind of broke the mold a little bit. And now, because we all kind of lived through, you know, similar circumstances in some way, where we're like, well, wait a second, you can see it actually happening. And I think it's more relevant now than it was in 2007 or 2010, whenever we first watched it.
I hate how relevant this movie is. I was like texting Terry, I'm like, I'm full on having a spiral right now. Like, this is too close to home right now. Like, ugh.
I think this kind of speaks to the artistry of this film, because back then it was a really good kind of metaphor for the kind of Iraq War, for instance, because like just I believe it was I did a little bit of research, and I think it was like the year before is when, you know, Saddam Hussein was dethroned and then was eventually executed. Bush was saying, mission accomplished.
Yeah,
we have fixed the area, and then as we know now, it didn't fix the area. It just opened up a vacuum where even more violence where what happened. And so I'm watching this now, and I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely a very clear indication of the kind of way we are dealing with the American exceptionalism, the idea of American exceptionalism going into other places and thinking that we are going to be able to solve things with military might. And so I see that aspect of it, and I'm like, this is actually a really smart kind of critique of that time period.
It's optics versus substance, you know, and it's like, I feel like they kind of use the same device and Don't Look Up in a way too. It's, you have this kind of figure, you have this, you know, the Elon Musk or whatever, I don't want to say, but whoever, what's his name? The great Mark Rylance's character in Don't Look Up. He's supposed to be the guy that is going to be able to manage and save this all. And then when that finally falls apart, you realize that you can't trust that. You know, it's like there's so much optics and there's so much of an idea of, we're going to build up this force and we're going to give the media, you know, the attention to this. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to the action of what's really working, it falls apart. And that's what I think this movie is really good at kind of dismantling, as you were saying.
But now watching this, as we are in like year 3000 of COVID, all I kept thinking about was like, everything was working, everything was fine, but then these fucking kids disobeyed what they should be doing and went out for selfish reasons, sorry to say, and ended up causing the zombie apocalypse to like come back in and come back. And I'm watching this now as we're, you know, dealing with like spikes in COVID, and we think we're at like a moment where we might be fixing it, and then people start unmasking, and then all of a sudden it goes back up, and we're like, I don't know why it's going back up. It's like I'm watching this unfold, and I'm like, this is fucking 28 weeks later, just with like a pandemic vice, you know, rage monsters.
And that's what makes it, you know, because you do root for the kids throughout, and you want the kids to be alive.
Oh, of course.
But then the final scene of that film is them getting on the plane to cross the English Channel, bringing the rage virus outside of London. And then you're like, well, wait a second.
Fucking the world
now
up.
We're all fucked, you know? So, and that's why I know that they've been talking about a 28 months later film for years.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would love, I mean, I feel like it's one of the better, it's not really a franchise, but like one of the better horror tunnels that I've been down. And I would love to see this come full circle and see what the next, you know, if we can have 6 Jurassic Park films, we can have it 28 months later.
Please. No, please go.
I already forgot what I was about to say. I left that quickly. It's
Monday.
doing.
We went over this, Terry. All right.
It is Monday. I'm telling you. I do. Okay, let's go back to the opening scene.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this cold open is like a perfect mini movie. Like you could just have released this and it would have been a perfectly self-contained story. But what I love about it is that it basically is a thesis for the movie. It's setting up everything. It's a kid that comes inside that brings the horde of zombies with them. It's the parents chasing after that kid. He's like, my parents became the zombies and they're coming after me, which is something that happens in it. It's this like idea that they have this little safe house in the middle of a zombie pandemic all around them, and they're acting as if like life is going on. Yeah, it's a meager existence and they're all like closed in, but they're trying to, well, we have wine. Oh, this is a good age of a wine. Or we're making pot, making all this kind of stuff while outside is going to hell. And then one small little crack in the surface and everything comes crashing in. And that is the same themes that I think the rest of the movie continues to kind of expound on for the rest of the runtime. And it's such a rewatching it and knowing from a critical perspective, knowing what's going to happen. It's like, oh, this is such a perfect opening.
Yeah, I think that's such a good observation.
It feels just like the way that Boyle shot 28 Days Later too. Like it has that same shaky cam graininess to it. This like, it feels very much in that vibe, which I never had thought about when I initially saw it, and obviously didn't remember. But it's like, it does this really good work of kind of, I think, tricking you into thinking, okay, cool, like we're gonna get a movie that looks and feels just like the original, and then it flips the script very quickly. But I like that. Like you said, Terry, it's like taking Boyle's aesthetic and making a mini Boyle movie and then kind of expounding on those themes in its own style and a bigger scope. And I think that like it's just an incredible way to start a movie. And I also think Robert Carlyle is a very attractive man. So he's a cutie and he's got a good accent. But
he does.
That aside.
I think that's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it as being like a bridge from 28 Days Later into what we're going to get with 6 months down the line. But they even use let's be honest, the score for both these movies, like you said, Brett, is iconic. Yeah. But that In a House, in a Heartbeat song that was used in the original one as Cillian Murphy is running through the house like a crazed person.
Yes.
That song is used here in the beginning of this movie, and it kind of connects that feeling from that first movie. And I love that. Well, first of all, that song is just. It's a fucking banger of a song. And I love that the composer, why am I drawing a blank on what his name is? John Murphy. The composer John Murphy takes that theme and kind of interjects it throughout the score a bit and plays with that. And I think John Murphy is a fantastic composer that just doesn't get as much love as some of his contemporaries, and it's unfortunate.
I agree.
Yeah. I feel like films in general are really made or broken on the soundtrack and the sound. And this, especially in horror, there's just so many little things you can kind of pull out to scare. What is so good about the soundtrack in 28 Days Later is it does a good job of working you up. And it's not necessarily that it's like creepy music, but it's high octane. So it kind of elevates your heart rate as you're watching it, and you're a little bit more amped up. So even if that was like the psychological goal of that, you feel like you're on this adrenaline race because you're listening to adrenaline-filled music, and you have to come down. I just rewatched the film right before I got on with you guys, and I still need to kind of bring myself down from it because you're on that pulsing. And that's what like the guitar in that does. It's like the da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. And it keeps you worked up, and it feels like you're running alongside these characters. And that's what is so good about that film, too, is that there's so many point-of-view shots. And the way that the film's shot is almost kind of like those scenes when they're hiding out. It's shaky cam. It's point of view. We're getting these like point-of-view jump cuts. We're using like the snarry cam as Robert Carlyle is running down the hallway. And everything is done from, it's a grand film, and we're seeing grand elements of a city being taken over. But it's up close and personal, which is what makes those moments land when Jeremy Renner dies, when you see Idris Elba's face melt, that he can't control this, that the bravado, big dick American general can't handle this situation. That is what makes that moment stand out. And, 28, I do feel like 28 Days Later it's a smaller film. It's a more compact film. And you do have, I feel, stronger relationships in that film, but you still get that small, intimate quality through the five main characters in 28 Weeks Later.
You talking about like the kind of steady cam or the hand cam and all that kind of elements. I think that there's an interesting thing here where the movie forces us at sort of the micro level. There's a macro stuff going on, like the bombing of the city and the fire and the gas and everything. But through most of the movie, it is focused on these characters' plight, and it puts you in their shoes so that, I mean, if you were to think about it and step back and think a little bit more rationally about what's going on here, you probably would not follow these characters. Yeah. But yet we are stuck with them. And so we care about them more than we care about the rest of civilization. Yeah. Because of the camera work and because of the focus on it. Because you're like, these guys got to make it out. I don't care that, by sacrificing the few, we're going to save the many. We have to get these characters out.
Yeah, and that's Jeremy Renner's character's entire, that's his entire dilemma throughout the film. And I think also the way that the script was written does that to you, because you're seeing, even the scene when Robert Carlyle, which is really a catalyst for the film, comes back in and he finds his wife who's infected with the rage virus and she's tied up in a chair and he's breaking down in front of her. The first thing he does is that he kisses her because he loves her, And what's so crazy about that scene is you don't know if she knows that she's going to infect him as like a punishment or what it is, because they show her and she has this stoic look on her face and she's not responsive. Robert Carlyle kisses her and there's still no response, and he kind of backs up, and then she starts to see that he's starting to change, and then she gets terrified. Now, watching this again, I was like, it made me think for like 15 minutes. Did she know she was doing this? Does she not know that she has to, she was bitten, so she must know that she's infected by that. But it's the little personal touches of the way that they kill people in this film too. Like when Robert Carlyle kills her and you're watching this man who just professed love to this woman that he just apologized to, and he brutally murders her and he sticks his thumbs through her eyes. That's taken from the first one, and it's their homage to the first one, but it's such a personal and vulnerable and horrific way to die that as a viewer, you're watching this and you're like, I can't think of anything worse than to be in the room with the man that loves me or the woman that loves me, and we're killing each other in the most intimate of ways. It's just, it's that quality of this film that makes it so horrific to me.
Yeah, well, and it's that very quick moment of, look, we're all reunited, the happy family's back together in the first couple of minutes in the movie. And then literally, she is back on screen for 2 minutes maybe, and then everything goes to shit. Yep. Which I think really plays into from the get-go plays into the nihilism of this movie. This is not going to be we're all back together and it's happy and it's great. It's no, it is going to shit absolutely immediately. And this whole idea of reuniting your family together and finding this person who is missing is not always going to bring you the closure that you want it to. And in fact, it can be quite dangerous, which again, I think speaks to our experience now of wanting to go back into the world, wanting to reunite with family and friends that we haven't seen, and how something as intimate and innocuous as a kiss can be so deadly. I mean, I had COVID and I didn't know I had COVID, gave my fiance a kiss, then tested positive and fucking freaked out. You don't know what one thing could do to giving someone COVID. And
I remember leaving the city. I left New York in June of 2020 and I was going to I rented a small beach house at the Jersey Shore. My grandmother was down there. And it was, for weeks, it was do I go over and say hi? I wanted to see, my grandmother was 96, I wanted to see her, I was always very close with her. And finally, once I was down there and I was kind of quarantined, I was getting over to see her. But I just remember thinking, if I get her sick, or if someone close to her that comes over gets her sick, it would be the worst feeling in the world to take that. But yet you want to, my grandmother's 96 and I wanted to, be there and give her love during a really dark time. And she was wanted to see me, and she didn't really understand like why, what the ramifications were if I were to get her sick, and it was, I remember just those thoughts it was a mental struggle for, weeks.
What I think I've been trying to think why I didn't like this movie when I first saw it, because as watching it now, it like is firing on all cylinders for me. And I do wonder if it's because there wasn't as much of a distance between 28 Days Later and this one. Whereas now it's like years later and I can watch it like disconnected from them, because while I love 28 Days Later, I think it is a fantastic film. I haven't seen it in a while. Yeah. So I'm watching this one and I have vague memories of 28 Days Later, but I'm watching this as its own thing. But thinking about it, because I had to actually go look on Wikipedia to remind myself how 28 Days Later ended, the first one. And it ends on a hopeful note.
Oh, yeah.
It ends on a kind of warmth note. And I kind of remember like the things I remember about that movie, besides like some of the more vicious things, the drop of blood in the eye and the whole military compound thing. There's like one shot where they're driving and there's like a field of flowers and it looks watercolor. It doesn't look real, but it gives this warmth. And there's like an empathy that I think Danny Boyle puts in a lot of his movies. Yeah. And going from that to this is like the opposite side of the coin. This movie is not, it's not empathetic. No. It's not, there's no sense of heartwarming. There's no sense of humanity in this film. Everyone is trying to basically get by and trying to do, I think you said at the beginning, Brett, like trying to do what they can with no choices. Like any choice they make is a bad choice and having to like live with that. And so I think that there's like, I think looking back on this now, it feels like the perfect kind of opposite side of the coin to that first movie. And I can't imagine them making a movie any other way than they did with this one, because it's so fucking nihilistic.
I mean, I think by basic film school, 28 Days Later is a better film, and they're both great. Mm-hmm. But 28 Days Later has a full picture, and I highly doubt they were planning on making a sequel. I'm sure they were going to it was going to be a one and done, and it was great. And then it was so successful that they were able to take the elements and draft it into a sequel. If we're talking about style, I know, because now that I understand color grading, I'm watching a lot of these scenes, and I'm realizing how much is actually shot day for night in this, and how actually unnatural some of the colors are in this. And some of the scenes, especially the scene when London gets blown up, it's so monochromatic, black and white, and yet when you have the image of the fire going through, it's so bright, and it's almost beautiful, but it's unnatural. And a lot of the coloring in this film is done unnatural. There's a lot of red casts that are thrown in when they're running from the lights. And you kind of have, Danny Boyle, I think, uses a very muted color palette in a lot of his things. And that kind of adds to the melancholy of his films, is that there's a muted and there's a desaturated way, where this film has muted and desaturated elements. But when they want to make a punch, it's vibrant. It's a lot of bright blues. It's a lot of bright reds. It's a huge orange fire, and you have none of that in the first 28 Days Later.
Yeah, that first film was definitely a lot more muted in that. And that's something I noticed here. There's some scenes at nighttime in this, and it almost looks like that kind of thing where the trick that people do where they film during the day.
It is. It's 100%. It's done day for night. Like I was watching that when they are running out of London and the sniper is shooting at them, and Jeremy Renner holds the mirror up. That is 100% day. It's day for night, because there's a really dark blue overcast in the shadows. Yep. They're using like an orange, it's like teal and orange color palette, but a little bit muted with darker blue colors. And I was like, that has to be, from understanding it more, it has to be day for night. And who knows if they wanted to shoot that, but a lot of this movie is done in the dark. And that's what makes this movie so scary, is that all the, when the outbreaks happen, it's nighttime. When they have the moment of respite, that's during, it's sunrise and it's sunset, but then they go right back into going into these horrific underground tunnels, and it's very dark. And that, that's actually, ironically, it's something that we did in the Andy Baker tape when we shot a lot of that. Was a lot of the dark elements in the Andy Baker tape, it always happens at night, and we wanted to have really dark elements with that. And our film was a mix of planes, trains, and automobiles and the Blair Witch. So the planes, trains, and automobile scenes, that's all done in bright sun. That's like we're having fun on that. And it was a conscious effort to make the dark elements done in really dark color, muted color palettes. I used a very monochromatic, the last 30 minutes, I changed the color grading to be a very monochromatic kind of tone. And I'm sure that the better guys are doing it what I did, but much better.
So, Mary Beth, I am curious because when we get to the point where they're in the subway and Scarlet, I think is her name, the character's name, is leading them with the night vision sniper rifle. Were you getting like Wreck vibes from that?
Wreck and The Descent. I got more like
The Descent.
I got more like The Descent only because of like how The Descent uses those found footage vibes.
I thought the same thing watching it today. That's so funny. I thought of Descent.
Yeah, and like I love, especially from this era because like 2007 was like found footage was like kind of the resurgence was like kind of gathered around that time period. So it's so cool to see when movies use the night vision like this, and it's like these really effectively terrifying moments. And it's just, and one day I'll write a book solely about movies that use found footage in them, not just found footage, but these segments. But well, like we get like whispers of that too when you see the sniper scope through a lot of the beginning of the movie.
Yep. And the CCTV footage.
The CCTV footage, too. And, like, there's these moments that are weirdly voyeuristic when, like, we have Jeremy Renner looking in everybody's window. Like, all the snipers are talking about everyone's business and, like, who's jerking off.
Rear
like,
window, it's
crazy
great.
shit like that. And it's just, like, so interesting how you can kind of subtly bring in these found footage voyeuristic elements and like how they can be adapted this way. Now that's not so much with like the night vision part, but at the beginning especially too. I thought about that a lot. But definitely got Descent vibes, big Descent vibes.
Watching those scenes at the end, I think that must have been really hard to shoot, and I think that the editing there was actually spot on because you can like when after the girl falls over the decomposing body and goes down, it's the editing there. I'm sure that must have been hell to figure out how we're going to get her tumbling down the escalator and Rose Byrne doing this. And they kind of do a lot of like real quick jump cuts in there. And I think that kind of masks the clumsiness of how it might have actually been on set and trying to avoid like having that. But using that found footage element, you can hide a lot. And we did that in Andy. I found that you can actually like, instead of showing everything, where true narratives, you have to kind of show everything, or it's like, wait, how did this happen? Using found footage, you can mask a lot. And if you have a good sound design and you have, what makes sense to get to A to B, you can hide a lot of things that would be really tough to film otherwise. I think 28 Weeks Later really utilized that really well.
The other thing that like really jumped out at me is the way that they use almost like second screen horror elements with the
Terry, I just have
the
to
military.
take a quick second to say I'm so proud of you and I love you so much and I have pounded this shit into your head so now you're seeing it. I have spread the gospel of found footage horror.
You want to talk about like a virus? Mary Beth is a found footage virus that just worms in you and you just like turn into a found footage zombie.
I wish I had her as a consultant when I was shooting Andy.
She knows that all. Yeah. I mean, she's seen so much. But
Sorry.
I was thinking back, and I think that there's like a connection here with the sort of like drone pilots that you would see, because there's a lot of scenes of the military that are away from all of the drama. They're sitting there, as opposed to being boots on street, they're watching stuff unfold through the camera. And it gives them sort of like a distance between what is actually happening, and it gives them sort of like that ability to like make calls and make decisions that are going to wipe out hundreds of people, thousands of people potentially, but they feel a little like disconnected from it. And there's that scene where, Stone is code red, and then he calls shoot everyone, and things are happening. And when it's over, finally, everyone sort of sits back, and it's almost like, wait, what do we do? This isn't like a video game. This isn't some disconnected storyline. This is really happening. We just called for the annihilation, the genocide of these people. It's horrifying.
Yeah. Yes, Terry, I'm sorry. My Alexa was just going off. Alexa, stop. I don't know what triggered that. If I interrupted what you were saying, I'm so sorry.
No.
I was like, someone's smart home is going off. Did we trigger it talking about?
I don't know how to turn it off. Every day at 5:18, I get this horoscope that comes in. It's like my recurring nightmare. I have no idea what to do about it, but it's like it gets me to the point where I like scream sometimes. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm like taking a nap, and that wakes me up. So
that's hilarious.
This is like this is my nightmare that happens every day at 5:18. So.
Oh my god.
Alexa's like, you must know your horoscope.
Know.
I'm going to tell you whether you care or not.
Yeah, no matter what, I get that. So.
Oh my god.
Where were we?
I think Terry just had like a beautiful epiphany about the film, and we kind of got distracted by horoscopes. But no,
drone warfare, the horror of seeing things, and yeah.
Well, it's like the idea of realizing that your parents are flawed. You know, it's like the first time you have the realization that someone that like we trust in the government to protect us, and in this, it's like what you were talking about is when you see. Those guys are like, wait, is this actually coming down the pipeline? And they're scared shitless. That affects you as a viewer because you're like, well, the people that we entrust to keep us safe and protect us, they don't know what they're doing either. And I remember that, it's like when I was in that stage where you start to actually realize that your parents have flaws, and they're not just like this overarching authoritarian voice, that it was a similar feeling in watching that movie. And I think that everyone that watches that can identify with, seeing the authority figure be stumped on what is actually going on.
Now, I do have, before we start moving into wrapping up, I do have a question because I had a note of this and I had highlighted it. And then you actually brought it up early on in the discussion, Brett. If we were in Don's shoes back at the cold open, what would you have done?
It's a really hard question, and it's because we're so. I would like to think that the hero in me would do that, but I had this incident when I was in London once, and this might give away something about me, but a man fell onto this station on the tube track. Ironically, this is London too, and I remember a bunch of people started screaming. And there was about 500 yards away was an oncoming tube train. And then they're trying to run over, and this thing was coming full blast. And I remember running over, and then something stopped me, and it was like, there was absolutely nothing that anybody could have done. And I thought to myself, I was like, I don't know if I want to see this, and I want to be close to this, and I stopped. Now, luckily, that train an emergency brake was pulled and they got that guy off the tracks. So I was there for that. But in the moment, in seeing this tube train hurtling, it's like there's no, you can't, if you jump down on the tracks, you're dead too. So what's the nobility? There's this amazing play. This is a long story to answer, but there's this amazing play that came out years ago, which I saw at the not Hartford stage, at the Long Wharf Theater in New Haven. And it's called The Train Driver. And I think it was an Athol Fugard play, which is really kind of about apartheid Africa. And it's about a train driver who's driving, is in the train, and a woman jumps in front of the train and she is hit by the train, and her baby die. And she does it because there's no escape. But the play really I saw it with Harry Groner, who's like this amazing theater actor. But the play follows this guy going through the process of seeing that, of saying, this is my fault, this is my responsibility. And it was a devastating piece of theater, but a really important piece of theater. And I think that answers the question. It's, I actually, Terry, I can't answer that. I'm sure if there is a zombie invasion and I'm in the room, I'm going to do whatever I can. But until you're faced with that, who knows?
Yeah.
Who can really, Caitlin, I love you. And if there's zombies break in, I'll be there to fucking protect you. So that's all I can say,
Yeah. I remember thinking when I first watched this, like the one thought I had in my mind was that the father was the antagonist in this, but I feel like rewatching this, I have so much sympathy for his character.
Yeah.
Because what would you do in that situation? Because especially as a parent, knowing that, if we both die, our kids are going to be orphaned.
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect of it too.
He's faced with such a complicated, and like, they would have both died. And is there nobility in dying besides the person you love, or at least one of them gets away, but then, he doesn't escape ever, really. He's still tormented by the decision that he made. And and Robert Carlyle does such a good job at layering in, because that character he plays, he kind of plays it a little bit sheepish. He's not really like this over-the-top guy, and you can see why he made the choice that he did. But he has love for his kids. You're absolutely right. He has love for his wife. That's there. He's not the guy that's going to go in a room. He's not, if Dwayne Johnson played that part, it would be a much different movie, But like, that's why they don't have these archetypal strongmen characters, which would be interesting to see, actually, to see a film where you have this archetypal strongman be faced with a situation where there's no fucking escape,
And like, I just have no loyalty for other people. And I think like, if I'd be like, fuck that kid. And maybe because I'm not a parent, and I know like the woman is like, the child must save this strange child. I'd be like, fuck you, kid. Like, maybe that says more about me than anything else, but I'd be like, absolutely not risking my life for you, child. Oops.
Yeah. Have you guys seen The Road?
I've not seen it, but I read the book.
The Road, you can't. I mean, the book you can't put down, but the movie. I mean, it's the same kind of questions that they ask in that. It's the same kind of thing. And then finally, there's a little bit of a silver lining at the end of The Road. But Cormac McCarthy is one of my favorite authors, and when he wrote that book, I remember I was reading about it, and I think he had his son when he was in his late 70s, and he knew that he wasn't going to be there to be a father figure to his son. So he wrote this book as an allegory as almost kind of an apology, but like as a guidebook for his son to make the right decisions in this world. And I think it kind of asks this similar question. It's like, in The Road, they're faced with the worst apocalyptic threat too. There's no salvation out of this. What are the moral choices? What do you have to do to protect, you have to protect, we stop thinking about the greater good and we only start thinking about our direct needs. But in those kind of situations, where as humans are we going to gravitate towards?
Right. Yeah. And see, I was thinking about this too, and I was like, wait, I just wouldn't be there. I am not meant for the apocalypse, the post-apocalypse. Yeah, I was thinking about, as I was watching this and I was contemplating that question, I was thinking back to 30 Rock, and there's this like dialogue between Jack and Liz where Jack is like, in a post-apocalyptic society, what possible use would they have for you? And Liz Lemon, who is, artsy fartsy, she's like, traveling bard. And his response is, radiation canary. And that is like, I am not meant for the post-apocalypse, so I would never have to make this decision. So that's like that's that for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea of the moral compass that we have gets so, I mean, that's why we have these societal guidelines, but when shit hits the fan, that moral compass, I feel like, is the first to go, which is what we see in The Road, which is what we see in these things, and it becomes self-serving. And that's as like a species, if we get away from all these ideas of how we should act and what we should be, we are here to survive and live. If there's no greater purpose than that, then what do we do to survive?
All right. Do we want to wrap this up and give this our rating out of 5?
Yes.
All right, Terry. How many killer parents out of 5 do you give 28 Weeks Later?
It's funny because as I was starting to watch this movie, I honestly, like I said, I didn't remember much about it, but I just remember not really caring for it leaving the movie theater. And I don't know how old was I at that time? I would have been 25. 25? Yeah. And I don't know what 25-year-old Terry was thinking, because this movie is it's fantastic. I think that it tells such a good side story to the first one, and it feels like a kind of more grumpy and nihilistic version of that story in a way. I love that it's a bit more macro level, but again, centers everything in that kind of micro character driven drama. And it's like a chase movie. The entire movie is like, it doesn't let up for a single second. And the one time that we do get peace, we get this fucking amazing set piece with the helicopter just mowing through zombies. Like it's like that is our one moment of taking a breath from the very opening sequence. So I mean, this is I think it's 4, and I'm going to cut one of those parents in half, and 4.5 killer parents for me. What about you, Mary Beth?
I think it's going to be 4 killer parents for me. I was waffling because, again, like, didn't remember anything about this movie, and I used to be such a huge snob about sequels. 28 Days Later, it is an incredible movie. It was one of my favorites for a very long time, so I automatically thought 28 Weeks Later was going to be horseshit. Which is probably why I didn't pay as much attention to it, which is why I don't remember anything. But chastising myself for that perspective now, and especially with what's going on recently, it feels so relevant. Mm-hmm. But again, that nihilism, we talked about, you guys mentioned this earlier, but I feel like Danny Boyle was trying to make his own version of a zombie movie, and this one feels a little bit more like trying to be a more what you would kind of expect from a zombie movie, but with a much more nihilism, kind of harkening back to Romero Day nihilism, not contemporary.
Yeah.
So there's this really interesting kind of harkening back to the original zombie film, more so than I think 28 Days Later did. Because there's always this debate about whether or not they're zombie movies, whatever the rage virus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this one to me...
It's pulling from that zombie genre.
Yeah, but this one to me feels more like a zombie movie, I think, formulaically, which is not a bad thing at all. But I think and again, it's trying to stick out from what Danny Boyle created before, and I think I didn't appreciate how much it was trying to stand on its own 2 feet, and how well it actually does accomplish that. So this has got to be 4 killer parents out of 5. Jesus Christ, this movie is brutal. Good Lord. Anyway, Brett, you have the final word. How many killer parents out of 5 do you give 28 Weeks Later?
Yeah, I there is so many good parts in this movie, and there's just rewatching it again. There's so many things that stuck with me. I give it a 4-2. So I give it a killer, and I give it a severed leg because in watching it has nothing to do with the story elements. It has nothing to do with the acting or the performances. In my opinion, as much as I love the editing, sometimes I feel the extra quick jump cuts. I'm curious to see if it would have had a little bit more breadth in those scenes, and who knows, maybe they played with that just to see a little bit that tightrope of the tension go here and there. But the performances are top notch.
They really are.
It's truly horrific. The themes that they bring up, I think, are executed well in the film. I'm giving it 4 dead parents and a cut off leg. So it's a 4.25 for me.
There you go. Oh, man. Well, thank you so much, Brett, for joining us and having me rewatch this movie after, 15 years, 14 years? Math is hard. Where can listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you can share?
Sure. Listeners can find me. My name is Bret Lada. It's spelled Bretlada. Everyone spells it with 2 T's. So my Instagram is Bret Meets World. My website's bretlada.net. You can search. I'm in a bunch of different shows on Netflix right now, things that have been out over the years, so you can watch some of that. It's all on my website. My film, which I'm really excited about, the Andy Baker Tape, premieres August 5th through Terror Films. Then we kind of have a wide release on August 12th through different platforms. And on August 19th, Kings of Horror puts us on that network. I would love everyone to join us for one of those premieres. I think you're going to have it's just a fun time. And I want to get everyone together and have a good fun time. So please come see that. Yeah. Check out the Andy Baker Tape. The Andy Baker Tape website is theandybakertape.com. Check out our trailer. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it.
And we'll throw all that in the show notes so listeners have easy access.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with 28 Weeks Later? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGailey Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.